Thank you, and thank you very much for the organizers to invite me. I should note that actually I reported to all three of the gentlemen to my left while at Roche, and I think a lot of my learnings and I take from that experience because they were all great leaders. I think we've had some great presentations already about culture and the importance of culture. We've seen about the importance of the evolving medicine, precision medicine, and in pediatric. I'm going to bring a little bit of maybe sobriety to the talk because, and maybe it's because I live in a world of chronic self-dissatisfaction, but I'm a little bit worried about our world, and we're going to hear a little bit more about it from John Haslam. But to me, I think if we're going to make the promise of great culture, deliver great things for patients, and if we're going to make the promise of great science, do great things for children, then I think we really need to start looking at how we are communicating as an industry to the rest of the life sciences environment, payers, caregivers, because I think that we are at a bit of a crossroads. And so the title of my talk was Getting the Phone to Ring the Other Way, because I think our system right now is too much of a push. Dr. Kadri, I think it was very encouraging to hear that the Ontario government was investing so significantly into healthcare. My worry is that when we get a 37% increase in specialists, I worry that some of their most effective tools may not be available to them in the future, and this is part of the talk that I'd like to bring forth this morning. So, very quick question. As a member of the life sciences community, I am blank about the future of our industry, as I believe the healthcare environment understands the values, the innovations we bring to Canadians. Very confident, somewhat concerned, very concerned, and drink heavily as I'm beyond concerned, if you would answer. So I think a good representation of what I hear when I speak to people within my own organization, Celgene, when I speak to my global colleagues about Canada, when I speak to many of you at various forums, that there's a real concern and an issue evolving from a regulatory perspective. And when I say regulatory, I mean the entire ecosystem of our industry in terms of regulation, payers, and the duplication that's resulting in some major significant shifts. We've been asking the same question for decades. Back in 1993, we talked about the cure for cancer, the possibility of Taxol, and then we look fast forward to 2013 and how to cure cancer, and all of this innovation and all of this change has made some significant changes in the lives of people around the world. And our industry and scientists and investigators around the world have been applauded for it, and yet we seem to be going faster and faster towards a cliff, and no one knows what necessarily is going to happen. What we see within the environment are great challenges, great opportunities. We've seen all of these, all of you in the room, whether or not you're in primary biopharmaceutical, whether or not you are a partner to that, delivering or servicing the industry. These are all of the things that we see, and I'm wondering if this continues at the pace that it's going to continue, whether or not the effect on culture, the effect on engagement, the effect in the entire environment starts to really evolve into a place that we won't be able to recover from. The fact of the matter is that human beings around the world are living much, much better, much, much longer, and frankly, we want all of us to do that. And I think that as we evolve as a society, we're going to need to address how we will get there in a way and deliver the value and be appreciated for the value that we contribute. We know very, very well that although we want to live longer, we want to live better, there are the challenges, and we seem to be able to articulate those challenges exquisitely well when you look at just what comes into the media. Celgene as an organization has spent a lot of energy trying to reframe some of the dialogue, and part of this conversation today is about some of the great things that we're doing as an industry, but also about the reinvention of pharma and how we need to establish ourselves within this ecosystem as being a valued contributor to all of the elements that are so critical. So we have recent advances, and in the area of a specific area of interest that Celgene has been working in for the last 20 years, you see significant transformational change in the area of multiple myeloma, a deadly blood cancer, and if you look to the far right of that steep, steep slope, we see now in Canada 4 different new interventions that are being made available 2 of which have been removed from the environment because of the regulatory and reimbursement landscape, and 3 more that are sitting and have been sitting in a queue that are being prevented access to patients that are substantially going to change how Canadian patients may benefit from these life-saving and life-extending therapies. And herein lies sort of the core question. How are we going to be able to take incredible innovation from this industry and make it a reality and be valued for that and be part of the global ecosystem? And if we don't start addressing that fundamental question in rooms like this and coalescing into a common communication platform, I think we're going to see less of these types of curves, less promise maybe for the pediatric population, although that always will have a heartstring component to it, and start getting back into a position where we may be faced with making some significant trade-offs that again will need to be decided in rooms like this around the country. The healthcare system is under significant pressure, and we seem to be able to articulate it very, very well. We can articulate it to ourselves in meetings like this when we look at it. We can describe the problem: aging population, definitely regulatory concerns, significant growth in risk factors, lack of data for informed decision-making, the growing burden of chronic disease, which in itself has negative connotivity, but now we have patients and people, some of us in this room, that will be able to live long, fulfilled lives while living with a disease rather than suffering and dying from it. We definitely have the entire social pressure within the framework of how do we fund it, the constrained budgets and the rising drug costs. So we seem to be able to articulate all of these things that are in the system exquisitely well, and we understand them, but we don't seem to be able to address what are the critical issues that we can do about it and what are the value offerings that we substantively bring. So I would suggest that it's time that we take forums and start taking some of the great outcomes of some of these types of meetings and really bringing it together into a platform that allows us to address as an industry with one common communication platform. It's always struck me that our industry is about great science. It's about taking things from bench to bedside, but at the end of the day, we are a communication environment. How we effectively communicate will ultimately change and can have dramatic change. So I wonder if forums like this, as they continue to grow, and I haven't been to as many of these as certainly as Robin and certainly as I would have liked for a variety of reasons, but I wonder where we may be able to start getting into forums where, as Einstein said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend the first 55 minutes discussing what the problem was and then 5 minutes getting into the solution. So the title was Getting the Phone to Ring the Other Way. And maybe I'll leave you with a couple of thoughts. I wonder if our industry is at a point where we need to be a little bit more provocative. We need to obviously align and truly understand what are the elements that will help our politicians, our governments, create a sustainable environment, but the sustainability shouldn't be built on increased regulation, increased delay, because ultimately that denies access and ultimately is going to perhaps, and I think we're starting to see it, absolute changes to the pharmaceuticals, to the options that are being made available. What is the solution to getting the phone to ring the other way? I think it's probably going to take people in this room and in other rooms some time to figure that out, but I would suggest that maybe, I'm not suggesting I would have voted for Mr. Trump, but maybe there are some things that we need to do to be a little bit more provocative in the environment. In December of 2008, we had a product that was before reimbursement review, #1 product being used for multiple myeloma around the world. And in the Canadian environment, despite offering a money-back guarantee, there wasn't a single province that was willing to make a decision to fund. Ultimately, we withdrew an important access program. We communicated it. It wasn't something we wanted to do, but it was something that we had to do because we had reached an end point. And then interestingly, although I think, I pride myself on the ability to communicate, we sent out the message that we sent out had a perverse response because it suggested that we were going to cut patients off. We weren't going to be cutting patients off, but we weren't going to be continuing to pay the program to new patients. That miscommunication generated a phone call on December 24th while I was buying a last-minute present for my daughter. And 3 months later, we had our first provincial funding. So somehow within this storyline, getting the phone to ring the other way, I think is an important concept that we need to start considering and taking a position that maybe not like Trump, but maybe in our own way, in our own Canadian way, gets the phone to ring, and then we can start changing the dialogue. Thank you very much.